Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast powered by NovaCare Rehabilitation alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN. I'm Darren Kinnard, and we're recording on Thursday morning as usual, and it's been a wild and crazy Thursday morning as there's been a lot of changes with the football schedules and some soccer times getting moved around because of yet another hurricane, remnants anyway, coming through our area.
I was told that hurricane season was supposed to be over. And here it is. It's week 5 of the football season here in Illinois, and it's affecting things. You don't see it normally affect things, period, but it's now going to affect 2 games of the football season. Now, granted, last time we didn't see things get moved up. We just saw a bunch of delays, and that resulted in some games happening Saturday. But, yeah, now we're seeing things say, let's not even mess with that. Let's just go ahead and try and get it done the night before. So this will be interesting here for some teams, including myself. Right before we went on, I had to start scrambling because of Murfreesboro Heron getting announced that it's being moved up to tonight. But it's going to be a fun week no matter what, and we'll see what happens here with everything.
And I think maybe some of the difference this time is that it's maybe projected to be a little stronger by the time it still gets here. And they're talking winds that could be still 40, 50 miles an hour potentially. And again, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then, just as we saw last time where it kind of tracked a little differently. And yeah, it was wet and messy in some places, but it wasn't nearly as bad as maybe we had thought going in.
Right, and from the projections I've seen, a lot of people have said, and now obviously I'm not a meteorologist or anything like that, but from what I've heard, everyone said there's less chances of storms than just very, very wet Friday night, lots of wind, and so I can understand the sentiment of let's just not even mess with that, and specifically for the winds, I think, because those type of winds out there and you have a bunch of bodies flying against each other, who knows what could happen. So, yeah, go ahead and if you feel like you got to, and obviously this is going to be put out there after the fact, but if you feel like you got to put it out there and say we're going to move the game up to avoid any potential issues, yeah, I can totally understand that sentiment.
I think the other thing that may be factoring into the decisions this week is the fact of homecoming at a lot of places, and they're trying to juggle. Well, when are we going to do the parade? When are we going to do this? When's coronation? When the dance is here, and it's not going to move. So Saturday night's out. We don't really want to play Saturday day because of preparations, that type of thing. And so I think that's certainly complicated it for a lot of places.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think I saw Murfreesboro said that they were going to crown their homecoming king and queen, have their whole halftime stuff happen on Saturday. I don't remember what time. I'd have to go back and look. I'm already kind of on uneven ground here a little bit coming into this podcast. But nonetheless, I think they're doing it Saturday. A lot of places, they're just trying to juggle with what makes the most sense for us right now.
We'll get back to the rest of Week 5 here in a minute. The other big story football-wise, we talked last week about the Black Diamond Conference inviting Red Hill. Monday night, Red Hill had their school board meeting, and they unanimously approved. So Red Hill will be joining the Black Diamond in football only. That's an important distinction. It's football only next year. So it is an immediate decision. So the Salukis will be in the Diamond next year. They will take Vienna Goreville's slot in the schedule, so that's kind of a plug and play. Just go that way. And again, Vienna and Goreville will both be still in the Diamond in all the other sports, and Red Hill is only a football member.
Yeah, I think it's a good fit. We talked about that last week. This has been a successful program the past couple of years. There'll be a competitive 1A school. Cesar isn't going to be the only competitive 1A school in that conference at this time, and so it'll make for good competition, and they kind of got a little taste of the action last Saturday when they hosted CZR, and they did well against CZR. So it definitely feels like a good fit right now, and then in a couple years when Vienna Goreville's ready to play varsity ball again, because we talked about last week, it does not preclude the potential of adding more teams. A couple years, Vienna Goreville's ready to go. They might say, you know what, we have one more slot available, and you just make sense. So it doesn't mean that the Eagles are officially out of the football conference. Just right now, it doesn't make sense for anybody if you're going to be a couple years away from varsity ball.
Yeah, there's no way to continue to have that spot. And talking to Red Hill Athletic Director Greg McKinney, we hear a lot of ADs talk about how tough it is to find games in certain spots. The South 7 with only having 5 teams and trying to find a game in the middle of the season, that's really tough. Well, as an independent, Red Hill had to find 9 games, including that middle of the season. And so they had some natural fits that were, okay early and late. But again, at weeks 3 through 8, very difficult. And now they become part of the Diamond, which will be a closed conference again. And scheduling is not a problem anymore.
No, not at all. And I don't envy any AD that has to walk in to a football season and say, how am I going to fill? Week 3 probably is still kind of an easy thing, but weeks 4 through 8 are tough. Everybody is basically in conference play at that point. Who do you turn to? You're probably making a long trip, or someone is making a long trip to you somehow, some way, because the independents are far and few in Illinois at this point. And so it's a 180 for them completely, and I'm sure they're very happy about it.
And that leads us into one of our Week 5 matchups. The Mount Vernon Rams are on the road tonight, and they are traveling to Akron, Ohio, or actually Friday night, rather. Mount Vernon at Akron Archbishop Hoban. So you get an idea, especially for the larger schools, Marion, Mount Vernon, finding those teams to play, very difficult. And the Rams are having to go to Ohio to fill their schedule. And
I would imagine then Hoban would come next year to Mount Vernon. That would hopefully be what the contract states. But yeah, that is a tough trip to make. I'm not even sure how Dan Mings is kind of setting up the trip necessarily. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it, but that is something that, if nothing else, is a once in a lifetime type of experience for a lot of these players. You hear about a lot of top high schools in the nation kind of going state, or rather nationwide, to play the other top teams in other states. But you don't hear about teams like Mount Vernon who aren't really at the top of the state hierarchy going across state lines. And so to be going really close to 1, 2, almost 3 state lines when you talk about Akron, they're just right there on that third state line. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because we know nothing about Hoban.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think that they're being a private school, and my understanding was they're one of the powers in the state. And again, early on when I heard this, I was like, holy cow, and I heard that, it is going to be one of those big trips, and the trips that the kids will remember. I believe they're going to be able to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
That'll be cool.
So, I mean, it's going to be a big deal for the Rams, who coincidentally are coming off of a nice win last week as they go to Collinsville and really administered just a smackdown, 45-21. And we wondered, how would the Rams bounce back after that tough loss to Marion? Mm-hmm. They did okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And they needed that win that type of way, honestly, to get back in the right state of mind, especially going into this type of game this week.
Exactly. You don't know where you're going to be sitting after this week, and if this is a team that is, maybe a top type team in the state, it could be tough, and you wouldn't want to be sitting there 1-3 going into that one. So let's take a look at some of the rest of the schedules in a game that was moved up to Thursday night. Waltonville's at CZR. Week 5, always the rivalry week in the Diamond, and so the battle for 148 is at Christopher, and that'll be on Thursday night. Of course, the Red Devils coming off an impressive shutout of Carmi-White County, 32-0. Both of those teams were 3-0 coming in. Maddie, you mentioned CZR going to Red Hill, and the Salukis won that one 39-12. And again, this is a rivalry game, and they call them that for a reason.
Without a doubt. And you throw the records out. When it comes to rivalry games, I understand people look at the record and say one's undefeated, one hasn't gotten a win yet, but it does become a little personal, especially in this type of environment with it's 4-0 versus 0-4. That 0-4 comes in and says, "Oh, you're all high and mighty, huh? Well, welcome to our house." And it becomes a good game generally. We're not going to throw predictions out for these Thursday night games and have freezing cold takes,
right?
but exactly. But nonetheless, these rivalry games usually end up being pretty good, even if the score doesn't show it. Usually there's a reason why people are coming out to these rivalry games, because every single time it turns out heated, no matter what the final score is.
Another one of those rivalry games dates back to the North Egypt Conference days. Fairfield at Carmi-White County. We mentioned the Bulldogs coming off a tough night at Waltonville. The Mules lost to Johnson City 44-26, but that final score is a little misleading. Fairfield was in the game at halftime and very competitive even into the fourth quarter with what many regard as one of the top two or maybe the top team in the Diamond. So very interesting game, and Fairfield sitting there at 2-2, Carmi-White County 3-1. For the Mules, the difference between 2-3 and 3-2, that is enormous.
Yeah, without a doubt. And Carmi-White County also just is looking to rebound as well after a tough loss to Cesar last week. They went into that game thinking, we're going to keep this close, we can get a win, and then they got completely shut out while Cesar ran all over them. Noah Pollard, I think, got held pretty well, contained pretty well in that game as well, one of the top running backs in the area. So he and the Bulldogs are going into this game saying, we got to bounce back from this. But meanwhile, the Mules at the same time are saying, we got to continue to recapture that energy that we've been trying to recapture. And you start with a team like Carmi-White County. So this should be a good one without a doubt.
And Pollard, kind of the Michael Jordan treatment, like Dan Patrick used to say, you can't stop him, you only hope to contain him. Right. He had a slow night with only 130 yards. Yeah. But SVW made him take 30 rushes to do that, and that was the big difference in that one. The other big rivalry game in the Diamond is actually on Saturday. That's Hamilton County at El Dorado. That's a 1:00 kick there. Foxes and Eagles sitting there, both with those postseason aspirations, and so now you've got a rivalry game. You've got playoff implications. It's a Saturday. It could be a mess weather-wise. All the recipes for a very interesting afternoon.
Yeah, both teams are very interesting this year. They're both kind of in the middle tier of the Diamond. Hamilton County is searching, trying to plant their flag down, trying to say, hey, we have arrived. And El Dorado had a good start to the season. They were getting votes in the 2A AP poll, by gosh. But when it comes down to it, they've kind of struggled in recent weeks. And so both teams trying to, push forward, gain that momentum, headed into the middle part of the season, because a win in this game could very much push you over the limit on terms of playoff implications, like you said, whereas the other team might be sitting at home come October 26th.
Now, with the rivalry aspect of the Diamond, they set up the schedules of that with recent movement of teams and such. This game is not a rivalry game. It's back to Friday, but it's a big one. You've got 3-1 Flora, and I messed that up last week. I said they were 1-2 going into the El Dorado game, but they were 2-1. Yeah. But they are 3-1, and they are going to 4-0 Johnston City, and so you've got a very interesting matchup. I believe, if memory serves, that Flora and Johnston City have not only hooked up in the conference, there was a playoff game. Yes. So I mean, this is an important game. From the aspect of, if you're Johnston City, that ability to stay unbeaten and potentially keep pace with SVW, and Flora, an opportunity for a statement performance.
Yeah, and I mean, you get to 5 wins and you've automatically qualified for the postseason. You haven't guaranteed a spot, but so getting to 5 wins, every coach says, we got to get to 5 wins. Right. After that, we worry about everything else. So it's a big deal for the Johnston City Indians in that regard. But Flora, they've been kind of hovering around that 4, 5, 6 spot in the Diamond the past couple of years since they came in. And they've been trying to say, we're here, another team trying to plant their flag here. And this is a potential for a statement game for Flora, who is looking pretty good this year. And if you just look on paper and look at the stats, they're looking pretty good. They've got one of the better quarterbacks in, I wouldn't even say Little Egypt so much, because they're a little bit out of that, but they're playing in Little Egypt. And so they've got one of the better quarterbacks in that regard. They're an interesting team to keep your eye on, and don't be surprised if they go ahead and take a win over Johnson City. Now, Johnson City, of course, is going to say, no way, no way. Right. And they do go in as the favorites, but don't be surprised if Flora does something.
The other Black Diamond team, Edwards County, will be taking the forfeit win. They were originally scheduled, of course, to play Vienna-Goreville. In the River to River, we mentioned your game, Heron at Murfreesboro. I know it. By the time we get this posted, it'll be probably pretty close to game time. But the Red Devils, with an impressive conference opening performance, and then they now get a chance at home against Heron, a team that's still searching for a win. Yeah,
and to my understanding, Chris Nelson, one of the lead players for Heron, will not be playing Thursday night, so that makes it much more difficult for the Tigers. But you know what? When the Tigers are cornered, generally, that's when they seem to play their best in past years. Now, I know this is a totally different coaching regime, But every single time you think the Tigers are cornered, they pop out and pick up a surprise win one way or another. Kyrie's Lukens is a threat by himself. He can go ahead and make any team tremble in their boots. So he's going to make this a game by himself. But Murfreesboro definitely does come in as the favorite because they're healthy. They've got, I think, everybody basically at this point. They started the season with some key injuries, and everybody's back now. And Tyjair Kellum is just running like he was last year, looking like he could get to 1,000 yards in a week or two, honestly.
And that was Murfreesboro opening the Ohio with the win at Massac County. The other Ohio game this week is Massac County at Harrisburg. And the Bulldogs, they were the odd team out in the Ohio, and so they went on the road to Alton Marquette last week and came up with a big win there as the Bulldogs cruised. And that was a 54-0 final for the Purple Crew. And now they go back home to open conference play, and so Massac County, they probably got a tough road here.
Yeah, probably. They were struggling with Murfreesboro last week, of course, and so you're going up against another one of the top teams in the conference. Last week they were without Chris Garnett, their leading receiver. I don't know if he's going to be back this week, but having him back would be a huge help. Cameron Fairfield is a pretty good quarterback, but he needs his guys to be there to assist him. He's got his running backs. They're all good. They're a little thin on depth, and that is, I think, what hurts Massac County more than anything. But they are a team that if you give them a chance, they're going to go ahead and take it. So Harrisburg has to come out and play the way that they know that they can play and do what they did last week, honestly, if they want to go ahead and beat Massac County this week.
On the Mississippi side, I think the game of the night or the weekend now, the game of the three-day schedule, 3-1 Nashville at 3-1 West Frankfort. Both of those teams opened Mississippi play last week with a win. Nashville took care of AJ 48-6, and West Frankfort beat Pinckneyville 61-33 behind 320-plus yards from Travion Johnson, 5 touchdowns. That's a career for some people, and,
yes.
and you feel pretty good about that if it's your career.
Yeah, Travion Johnson is just showing out like he was a couple years ago. Last year, I thought that he kind of took a step back, but that's because he was playing quarterback as well, so he didn't get to burst out like he had been in his sophomore year. And this year, he is just looking amazing. 300 yards last week, like you said, 5 touchdowns. 4 of them came in the first half. He is a dominant force, and it's not the West Frankfort that we've seen the past couple of years. This Redbirds team is dominant, and it's going to be a really good game. I was talking with Byron Heltzler earlier this week, and I was asking him if he could take pictures for us for one game, and he unfortunately had some plans already, but I was telling him, if I was going to pick one, though, that would be the game, because it is it looks like it's going to be kind of a primetime type of game.
Byron had plans.
Yes,
I think Byron saw the forecast. I'm just going to go ahead and lay that out.
It may have played a role.
And Byron made a business decision. And here's the thing: is that Nashville and Frankfort, the only 2 teams in the conference without turf. They're playing each other. The potential to have a muddy track, and you mentioned Travion Johnson having such a great season. Samuel Colbaum from Nashville, I believe he's got 9 touchdowns the last 2 weeks, and so this is going to be a very interesting and matchup, and be the fact that if it is raining, if it is windy, if it all things, it's going to come down to who can run the ball most effectively, and more importantly, maybe who can hang on to the ball.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you've got, like you said, 2 of the top running backs in the conference going head-to-head, 2 of the top running backs in the area going head-to-head. But the one thing that is maybe the difference maker is Nashville has also a quarterback and a couple of receivers. Not that West Frankfort doesn't, but when you're talking about quarterback, wide receiver, when it comes to the Mississippi division, the river to river in general, they're near the top of things. Blazier and Langman are pretty darn good, and so I don't know how good West Frankfort's secondary is, so I'm not going to sit here and bash them by any means. They might put up a great night against those 2, but I do think it does come down to Colbaum and Johnson.
You mentioned rivalry week in the Diamond in the Mississippi. Week 5 is the Perry County battle, DuQuoin at Pinckneyville. The Indians coming off just an enormous performance at home to beat Benton 21-10. That game was just a defensive slugfest, 10-7 going into the 4th.
Yeah.
The Indians get a couple fourth-quarter touchdowns to pull out the win. So DuQuoin is sitting there at 3-1, 1-0. Pinckneyville, it's continued to be a struggle. And again, we get back to that rivalry game, and and I think that we always talk about when you have a team that's maybe heavily favored or whatever, it's important for them to get out to a big start.
Yes.
And that's really true, especially in a rivalry game. It's like, look, we're the big dog here, and you need to stay in your spot. But if that game stays close, and then all of a sudden, late, Pinckneyville might have that opportunity to come away with the upset victory.
Yeah, past couple of weeks, Pinckneyville's quarterback Reed Marlowe actually has shown improvement each and every single week since week one. You sit there and say, okay, you didn't complete a lot of passes week one, and you threw a couple interceptions. Then the next week, he throws a touchdown pass, at least in there. Then he starts completing more passes, getting a couple more yards. And then last week, he didn't throw any interceptions, got 2 passing touchdowns against West Frankfort. Yeah, that was a lopsided loss, but he showed promise there. And now you're going up against a good DuQuoin team. Pinckneyville probably is primed for or due for something here, but DuQuoin is really good. Jonathan Brown has been a fantastic quarterback here, playing the role of basically everything on offense for DuQuoin. So he'll be the key here tonight. If he shows up and puts up another performance he has the first 4 weeks, then yeah, it's probably going to be DuQuoin. But if Pinckneyville can slow him down somehow, they probably got a chance.
The other Mississippi game has Benton. The Rangers were sitting on top of the world after 2 weeks, but they don't end the season and hand out trophies for 2 weeks. Been a rough couple of weeks for the Rangers. We mentioned they lost at DuQuoin last week to open the conference, and so AJ is a team that's been struggling here, looking for its first win, and so that feels like a recipe for a tough night for the Wildcats as the Rangers as they look to bounce back, and they've got a lot of things to get off their chest.
Yeah, right, exactly, and that usually is something that you look at. People are always, when you talk about football, and people that don't know football, they're like, how does that play a factor, really? It does, because they play a little bit harder with every loss, but that goes the same for Anna Jonesboro. They're playing a little bit harder because, we got to get that first win. We can't go winless and stuff like that. And they changed things a couple weeks ago. Dawson Nicholas is no longer their quarterback. He's back to just playing running back, and he's been running all over people now. But yeah, it does feel like a recipe for Benton's success. But again, as we've said for multiple matchups here, you overlook the underdog, and that's when they strike.
And it's homecoming week in Benton, and I know coaches, you've heard it numerous times, coaches are always concerned because there's so much going on, and football is not necessarily always at the top of that list. Right. And so that'll be what Coach Groves and crew have to deal with in Benton. In the South 7, we mentioned Nashville, Frankfort being maybe the game of the night. The other one, it's maybe 1A and 1B, and Marion at Cahokia. The Wildcats are 4-0. After taking care of Lighthouse Christian in a non-conference game last week. Cahokia took care of business against Carbondale 44-21. So the Comanches at home. Wildcats are unbeaten going in. Yeah. This is a big one. And it's a little different going to Cahokia now because there is turf. It's not the rough grass field that we've talked about in past episodes. But again, this is a doozy.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it doesn't feel like, the winner of this walks out with the title necessarily.
No.
The South 7 is just so good. But it does feel like it's maybe, the first turning point I would say was the Marion win at Mount Vernon. So this could potentially be the second turning point for the South 7 season. Win or lose for either team. It's going to be a bit, they're both looking for big wins. Marion could get to 5 wins here tonight. It feels like just one of those really big games that, again, Marion's tasked with a huge task on the road. Can they rise to the occasion once again? That is the big question. While Cahokia is looking like they are world beaters right now, honestly.
And, you mentioned it doesn't necessarily settle it, but Marion would be sitting there 2-0 with road wins at Mount Vernon and at Cahokia. Right. That would be a big leg up in the race. Without
a doubt. And also, here's another thing for just Marion's, just the air around the team. You'd beat last year's win total right there. And I know that's a big thing hanging over that program's head after starting 4-0 last year and then losing the last 5. If they can get over that hump Friday night at Cahokia and get to win number 5, everybody kind of lets loose a little bit, exhales and says, okay, all right, we beat that team and now it's on to the next challenge.
The other South 7 game, Carbondale's at Centralia. The Orphans bounced back after a couple of tough back-to-back losses, total of 3 points in 2 games. The Orphans hammered Granite City 49-6. We mentioned Carbondale struggling at Cahokia. It's been a struggle for 3 weeks now for the Terriers after that win over Murfreesboro. And so with Mount Vernon, with the schedule, they still have to go through Marion, and with some of the other, the remaining games for Carbondale. This kind of feels like a must-win for the Terriers.
Absolutely, it does. Centralia kind of is still fresh in terms of the South 7 season and things. It does feel, though, like for Carbondale, you don't win this one, and things are, you're sitting at 1-4 at that point. You have to win out to even qualify for the postseason. And in terms of the conference, you can just kiss that goodbye, basically, because it's just at the top, so competitive. So, but on the same side, Centralia looking to kind of prove that, we're here as well. Those early mishaps, they weren't us, and now we're here and we're ready to go. And so it does feel like a big game for both of them, but a little bit bigger on Carbondale's side because, like we said, you lose this one and the season kind of just landslides the rest of the way through.
Yeah, and they still have Granite City left, which, that feels like it's a win. They got a team out of St. Louis who I really know nothing about.
I had heard before the season started, that one might already be scratched. So it's still on the schedule. So we'll see. I guess in a couple weeks.
That team they ended up having to get out of a game week 1 because they had double booked, and I'm not sure how that happens, but it apparently did. And then they close out the South 7 with Marion, and then week 9 is Mascoutah, who is maybe not at that level that they have been, but that's still a different brand of football in the Mississippi Valley. So
it's a tough remainder of the schedule. So for Carbondale specifically, Friday night must win against Centralia, because if you don't, you look at that and you say, okay, you might be able to get 2 or 3 wins out of that. Well, with 2 wins, you'd qualify then with the rest of the way, But if you don't, then it's tough sledding.
In other conferences, Cahokia, Illinois, unbeaten Chester's at Westland. Dupo visits Carlisle. Redbud and Sparta, that game is at Redbud. That game has been moved to Thursday night. On the Mississippi side, a couple of games moved to Thursday night. East Alton Wood River at Bree Central. Salem at Roxana. Both of those games are now Thursday night. The other game, Freeburg at Columbia. In the Little Illini, Lawrenceville's at Casey Westfield. Marshall at Robinson. Mount Carmel's at Paris. Newton at Richland County. And again, when you look at the Little Illini, Mount Carmel's a team that had a slow start, starting to come on. Olney, Richland County is unbeaten. Casey Westfield is unbeaten. And so these final 4 or 5 weeks in the LIC is going to be very interesting for the conference race.
When you get into the meat of the season, which is right now, weeks 4, 5, 6, you have these discourses of first of all, who's going to win what, who's going to kind of pull ahead in the conference races. But also at the same time, it very much is still, you're in the blender. You're still looking at it and saying, well, so-and-so is 2-2, but so-and-so is 4-0. So the win is needed more for the 2-win team and whatnot. It's still very much kind of, it's strange discourse, I feel like, in the meat of the season, because you're still kind of figuring out the teams a little bit here in week 5. Once you get past week 6, everybody kind of knows who is what. But it makes for great conversation too.
And week 5 is kind of that exact midpoint of the regular season, which is again a strange thing to say. It feels like we were just talking about the season opener here just yesterday, which clearly it was 5 weeks ago. Mississippi Valley, we mentioned Mascoutah. They're at home against Civic Memorial. Highlands at Waterloo. And Triads at Jerseyville. Southwestern Conference, it's Belleville East at Alton, Belleville West at Edwardsville. Saturday, East St. Louis is at O'Fallon. And in non-conference games, we get back to a couple of our area teams. Carterville, the odd team out in the 5-team Ohio. So the Lions have a non-conference game, and it's the return game, and that means a road trip for our crew. And then for the Lions is they go to St. Joe Ogden.
Yep. And that was a good game last year.
Absolutely.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Carterville won that game.
Yes.
It was an exciting game, so expect for another exciting game this week, and I'm probably putting the jinx on them, but I told someone before he came in here that I think that game's not getting affected by the weather enough that they should be playing a Friday game.
Yeah, and St. Joe Ogden is obviously a school that has tremendous tradition, and Friday nights are a big deal up there, and so now you get a Carterville team that's going up there that, as you said, beat them last year, and so that has a chance to be a pretty good game.
Yeah.
We mentioned Mount Vernon's at Akron Bishop Hoban out of Ohio. A couple other non-conference games. Alton Marquette's at unbeaten Althoff. That looks to be a running clock game in that one. Mater Dei is suddenly playing a little better, and the Knights had to make the trip to Macomb. And the other non-conference game is Collinsville at Granite City on Friday. On Saturday, Red Hill is at home against the Bunnies from Fisher.
Ooh.
So that's there's no good way to get from Fisher to Bridgeport, I'm guessing. So
Breeze Mater Dei Macomb should be a pretty good game, honestly. But based on what I've known about the teams the past couple of years, Murfreesboro's played Macomb a couple times. Just that looks like it could potentially be one of it won't be game of the week for us in this area since it's in Macomb. But it looks like it could be a really good game.
The interesting thing in other sports is the fact that we are already knocking on the door of postseason in golf.
Yes, we are.
And this week is all the conference tournaments in golf, and it's similar to college basketball in that way, in the fact that you have the conference tournaments before you have the big postseason tournaments. You don't have to qualify for the postseason necessarily, but you always know that when you see the conference tournaments, postseason's next week, and that's what we have. The regionals are next week, and Tuesday and Wednesday. You got the girls on Tuesday and the boys on Wednesday. And man, all of a sudden, it's kind of that downhill slide for the fall season.
Yeah, when Monday the announcement for the South 7 tournaments was put out there about their needing to move, I kind of sat there, scratched my head a little bit and said, oh, we're already at conference tournaments. Oh, shoot. So it always sneaks up on you because you're always, in terms of the fall, and I just say, you're always looking towards week 10 of the football season. And then everybody else happens beforehand. You're like, well, hold on a minute.
Right.
We're not there. Yes, we're there already.
And they moved golf up in an effort a couple years ago because you get middle of October and later in Bloomington, you don't know what you're going to get weather-wise. They had one year they had a round snowed out, and so that led them to move the season up. This year they kept the regional and the sectional the same weeks as with the schedule moved up, but because of the Jewish holiday, they ended up moving the finals back. So there's going to be a 2-week window there between sectionals and the finals. So again, that means that's a long way to say we're still getting the postseason here pretty quickly. That first week of October.
And I can speak to not knowing what you're going to get in Bloomington in mid-October.
I knew you could.
Being a native of Bloomington, it still shocks me, having been in Southern Illinois for almost 8 years now, and we're in September, and still kind of dealing with a bit of a heat wave a little bit. And I'm like, this just does not feel right to me. But yeah, when you get into October, you're sometimes looking at 40-degree weather in Bloomington, and that's 3.5, 4 hours away.
Well, and we've talked about this a lot in spring sports. I mean, Illinois is an enormous state.
It is. People forget that.
And you think about the weather that we have in the spring and how dicey it can be. Well, what's it like in Rockford, which is 5 hours north or whatever? And really for golf, and there'll be a lot of people that go, well, that's why those state tournaments need to be down here, and the girls' state tournament used to be down here, and they got moved because the IHSA wanted to centralize it. But I think it is something that you scratch your head and go, why would you? There's no guarantee that it'll be great weather down here.
Yeah.
But I like our chances better.
Yeah, I'll get on the soapbox a little bit again. Being a Central Illinoisite, or however you Illinoisan, being a Central Illinoisan. I'll get on the soapbox for Southern Illinois here and say, why is there really nothing coming to our... You should, if you're going to say, okay, we're going to cycle through places, that's fine, but you got to give, for the stagnant place, you got to give a couple of them to this area, and the fact that there isn't is, especially for the sports you need good weather for, it's disappointing. And,
in past years, it's been, well, there's not enough hotels, and you think about a state tournament and all that. That's changed quite a bit over the past few years in the region.
Come visit.
And so yeah, this is the River Radio Sports Central podcast lobbying for at least state golf to come back to Southern Illinois because look, I've covered the state tournaments enough to know that, you know, it doesn't matter. I have to wear layers upon layers because it can be a perfectly calm day anywhere else. And in central Illinois, there's a 20-mile-an-hour wind. And, you know, it always seems inevitably that, you know, we have the regional down here is in 85 degrees. And then by the time you get to state, you've got to have thermals and multiple layers.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you host everything in a valley.
That's true.
That's what I'll say about it.
That's true. Well, that's going to do it for us here on the River Radio Sports Central podcast. Of course, join us on Facebook on the River Radio Sports Central page for Friday Night Live, powered by Charlie's AC and Heating, as we will go through all the scores that play on Friday night, and hopefully I won't be too drenched, and hopefully we won't have many delays. And so I'm just trying to, you know, the big hot word now is manifest. I'm just trying to manifest that, you know, so maybe we get that dry slot and be able to get our games in a proper time. But we'll talk about it all on Friday Night Live. Of course, we'll have all the scores as well. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.